You're trying to figure out like the profitability of that 16% slice, but you've got the other 84 piled on top of it. And your business is the shock absorber that absorbs the timing of all those inflows and outflows. Like that becomes a really tricky accounting problem for even one single project.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Modern Craftsman. Today we have the founder of Patriot High Performance Homes. He's also the founder of LedgerWise. It's a construction finance tech. He's Naval Academy mechanical engineer graduate, former Navy SEAL officer, led training for hundreds of SEAL candidates over 18 months, went to the University of Chicago Booth, got an MBA in finance and economics. It's a rare guest who has elite operational training, elite financial training, and real custom building experience, and is now building a software to fix a structural industry problem. Shane Durkin is our guest today. And, you know, one of the things that we promised a couple weeks ago is that we're going to bring on more real conversations, especially about money. So today is one of them. And, you know, Shane has an MBA from Booth, but now he sees other builders' books for a living. So we want to ask him what he sees and what he is fundamentally changing in construction businesses, and how, you know, there's two very specific things that we talk about that ultimately will make people, or, you know, make builders better builders. And I think one of them you will be pretty surprised to hear when we get into the specifics.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and it just evolved from his life growing up, his military career, his education, his postgraduate education, to working for a builder, to owning his company now, and like how that all led to the financial aspects of construction companies. So a really great, just natural, organic conversation that leads up to just this absolute bomb of financial information that he dropped. So great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
This podcast is brought to you by Anderson Windows. As you guys know, we just finished Echo Pond, and I was there. We were filming the final episode of our series with all of the Anderson big door lift slides. Dude, those things are so cool.
It's impressive.
It's like, I love the design and the way Vincent and his team designed everything, but, you know, in some of the earlier videos, we talked about how that, you know, they're not doors, they're windows. And everyone's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, it's just designed to be open for, you know, letting air through. It's like, does that mean you can't walk through it? I'm like, no, you can walk through it. And
you're overthinking this.
Yeah, you're overthinking it. It's just not designed as a door, but yes, you can walk out of it. And the screen, they decided not to put the screens on, which I thought was interesting, but it's just super cool. And, you know, it was really cool to go out to Oceanside and see obviously them being made, and then just working with their team on the technical side. But the ability to work with that product and see it now done in Echo Pond, and getting the client's feedback and just seeing how all this stuff came together makes me excited about, you know, working with them on some future project. So if you want to learn more about their products, AndersonWindows.com, ANDERSEN Windows.com.
Check them out.
This podcast is also brought to you by Harnish Workwear. If you guys, dude, it's warm out. And as you will hear in this,
tropical out.
I was gonna say, Tyler says it's tropical. So you probably are due for some new T-shirts. So I would hop over to Harnish Workwear. They can get you set up. If you don't have branding done, they can help you with branding. If you do have branding done, you can send over what you want on those T-shirts, and you will get the best fitting, most comfortable work shirt on the market. I actually texted Kyle the other day. I was like, hey, can I just order blanks? And I actually don't know if he wrote me back, to be honest. But I was like, I just want to wear this shirt without branding. Like, this will be my blank. If I don't have an NS Builder shirt on or a Modern Craftsman shirt on, I wear a black T-shirt and I buy like another brand, and I'm like, these don't fit as well.
Yeah.
So it's literally my favorite T-shirt. If you guys don't have them, you should. If you need workwear or T-shirts for your crew, do it. Period.
I need to get on that. I've realized I've been looking pretty haggard lately, and my closet is just old T-shirts. I need to get on it.
Time for a
I need to
closing
listen
dump.
to this podcast.
Do
and
it.
Take heed.
All right. Let's see if they get your color.
Seriously.
Tyler, your house looks like it's coming along. That foundation went in quick.
Yeah, I got to go make some money now. Do a couple of jobs.
Are you using Superior walls? Is that what that is?
I did. Yeah.
2.5 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. How did it come together? Like pretty true.
Yeah. So like the one corner, the most that's out anywhere is probably a 1/4 inch, and it's like just the top of the concrete from however they formed it.
Yeah.
Rises up in one corner, and then like everything as far as length and at a square, it's within a 1/4.
Wow.
So yeah, it's very close and very quick. And from a cost perspective, it was comparable. It was less than poured, and it was comparable to CMU, and it's just like a lot of CMU labor and time.
Totally.
So like, especially if you're finishing, I don't think it would fly in California due to seismic activity that you guys have.
Yeah. Probably not.
But we have like really good soils. They're not expansive soils. And it just like from a time perspective, money perspective, especially if you're doing full basement walls, you can essentially finish them. They have the studs, they have the knockouts for conduit, and you're ready essentially to drywall after installation. So like if you ever plan on finishing the space, it makes sense. I think I wanted crawl space because we have a high water table. I'm doing conditions crawl space, and we're putting all our utilities down there, and it's like 280 some feet of foundation wall, and it was like 22 grand to fabricate, deliver. There was 2 tractor trailers, a crane, 4 guys installing, and like a site supervisor, and they had 2 site inspections beforehand. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they were doing like after my job, they got done. And they're like, we're going to do another job. So, I mean, it makes them money. To me, it's still like, I can't justify spending a ton more time on that type of stuff, especially since it's just a gravel foundation or a gravel footing. So I could do all that prep work myself and get the sweat equity out of it. So it did make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Will King I think he's in Alabama. He's used Superior walls quite a bit on full depth basements. Super interesting concept. Is it custom, or are you just basically getting prefabricated panels of a certain height?
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Everything's essentially made by hand. Like it's off site, and it's in like they're a commercial precast company. But as far as the studs, the layouts, the insulation, it's not as though machines are doing it. So yeah, they can make pretty much whatever you want. I think it gets to a point where it's like, if you're truly custom, does the cost make sense? Because like obviously with every single change you're making, it goes up from there.
Right.
But even for me, like to go to a full foundation height, it's not a huge cost difference because the labor and the crane and all that stuff stays the same. It's just a little bit of material cost.
Right.
So I think it would have been like $6,000 or something more to go with a full height. The problem for me is like, I couldn't really dig much further without worrying about water table and dewatering. And then also I didn't feel like raising grade up 4-6 feet around my entire property. I just wasn't interested in that. And also I feel like basements just wind up collecting shit. And I was like, I could put all my utilities down there. The way I'm going to frame it, it's going to all be hung and flush. So I'll have 4 feet like of true clearance under there. So it'll be like a decent utility space, and condition. So everything can live down there and be fine, sealed up, nice and neat. So
yeah, smart.
It made sense financially for me too. It's a neat system.
Totally.
If you have the right soils for it. For me, it was a couple grand worth of stone and obviously digging it, but very, very straightforward, very simple.
Yeah,
and I honestly, like everyone that I've spoken to who's used it, nobody's had anything bad to say about it. And like I did a fair amount of homework on that. So yeah, I'm excited. I'll take a little break now. I got to get some other stuff in order, make some money, and then hop back there like first week in July, get going on some more stuff.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
you're kind of living every builder's dream to be able to build their own house. So
Yeah, I know.
Dude, if you're
I tell 'em all
out
the
if
time.
you're out there with me like in the heat, I mean it's fun, but at the same time I'm like, damn, what did I get myself into?
Yep.
It's like it felt tropical out there the other day and I'm hand shoveling 40,000 pounds of stone around in a hole and I'm like, oh my God, my back hurts.
It's gonna feel that much better when it's done, though.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been nice too because I live 2 lots down, so my kids come by after school, give me a nice little break. My wife stopped by a couple times a day. It's very convenient.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Are you from California?
I am not. I'm originally from the East Coast, down in Maryland,
Oh, nice.
and grew up there in a suburb outside of DC, and moved to California after college. I was in the Navy, so the Navy brought me out here, and this place has been home ever since. And my wife's from San Diego, so we've got family here now, and our roots are firmly planted, but still have the bit of that East Coast heritage in me, I guess.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to the Naval Academy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I grew up in Maryland, so it was sort of just by proximity, and kind of fell in love with the place as a young kid. Really fell in love with the lacrosse team there, and kind of went there not really knowing what I was getting myself into in a way. Like, had no kind of idea what military service would look like beyond graduation. And
Yeah.
if it wasn't for that, I probably would have ended up in construction right afterwards. But of course, life took a different path, and did the military service thing for the first part of my adult career. So got stationed out in San Diego and kind of fell in love with this place right away. And so I call it home. I don't know that we'll ever leave here. I still have family on the East Coast and scattered throughout. So we'll see what life throws at us. But that's kind of how I ended up on the West Coast.
Yeah, my grandfather went to the Naval Academy. He was, I think, the class after Jimmy Carter. He's
Oh,
dead.
yeah.
Yeah, but a long time ago. So we went down. Annapolis is a nice area.
It's a cool
It's
place.
expensive. It can't be more expensive than California though. So
Yeah, it's probably up there. I mean, it's pretty upscale town nowadays. It's built around that whole sailing community there, and has that whole historic district. It's a really cool place. My wife and I always say if we had to move back to the East Coast, that's probably one of the places we'd find ourselves in Annapolis.
that's sweet. What
Yeah.
would make you move at this point? Just family?
Probably so. Yeah. I mean, we really like where we're at. So I now live in a really small town called Coronado. It's just beside downtown San Diego, and it's a really cool place. It's this like tiny little island, that it has that like sort of beach coastal community. You can kind of raise your kids in a way that allows you to like give them a longer leash, and they can kind of get a bit of that East Coast upbringing where you can just sort of let them roam the island and not be too worried about the trouble they can get in. And so it's kind of the closest thing that we've found to being able to raise our kids the way I was raised, where my brothers and sisters would just be able to run through the woods, endlessly
Yeah.
for days on hours. And so we really enjoy where we're at, and it's great for work too. I mean, it's a very unique little town that I'm in. It's a great place to be a custom builder. And so we were very fortunate that we got our foot in the door here. And given that Britt's from here, she's got family here, I don't know what would cause us to leave other than, like you said, family. We want to be closer to siblings or my, dad as he ages, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what's the guy, Nick? Is it Ale Tile Adam?
Yeah.
I feel like he's out your way.
E-Tile.
Adam Aspart.
Right?
Adam
Not
Aspart.
E-Tile.
No. Ale. I think it's ALE,
Oh, okay.
maybe. Adam. He's like an old school tile setter out there and does like beautiful work.
I think I
forget
think I do know who you're
exactly
talking
where
about.
I forget exactly where he is located.
I think you're right. I think he is in San Diego though. If
Yeah,
I'm thinking
he's
of the
not.
right guy.
Yeah, Adam
Esparza, maybe.
Yeah, and then it says Orange County.
I forget exactly where he is. He does dope
Yeah.
work though.
Yeah,
Um,
like super like old school.
yeah. Do they like very traditional tile setting methods, which I think is cool. They don't really do that much on the East Coast
Foskin?
anymore.
I guess. Bixie Knolls, Foskin, Whittier. Those are all Long Beach,
Yeah, he's
Old
up
Town.
north a bit.
Yeah, Old Town Orange.
Have you been to San Diego, Nick?
Yeah, we did the whole coast, and we ended in San Diego and spent a couple nights there. I mean, San Diego is massive. Like it's just, I mean, what they call San Diego. I remember being there. We were at a restaurant, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm from San Diego," but like over beyond those buildings, I'm like, "That's like Boston to Quincy. Like
Yeah.
that's so far away."
Yeah, San Diego County is quite large. I mean, but it's a good like mid-sized city. The county has a
Yeah.
population, I think, of 3 million.
I
Maybe
think we were
only
near
like
SeaWorld or something like that, and like the city was like pretty far from that.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great place. It's expensive as heck. I think it's like getting up there is one of the most expensive cities, and
Mm.
yeah, not showing any signs of slowing down, that's for sure.
I don't think anything is, to be honest.
I know.
What did you initially go to school for?
I studied mechanical engineering, but truthfully, I would say I actually went to school for sports first and foremost. I was kind of interested in engineering and lacrosse and was kind of searching for schools that fit both those criteria. And the military service thing definitely spoke to me, but not at a level I could fully comprehend. It just seemed like, oh, this is a great way to, make the most of myself. And it was just a good fit. It had a really great lacrosse program at the time that I really like aspired to be a part of growing up as a kid, but obviously wanted to study engineering. It's got a really good engineering program there. So it was a good fit. And I think that that was really like a product of my upbringing. Like I was just always had a natural inclination to want to build. I was very like passionate about building. My dad worked for the Carpenters Union growing up, and he wasn't really a builder by trade, but we were always remodeling our house. We were always working on something. And I was kind of his only apprentice amongst all my siblings. I've come from a big family. And so I think naturally that's what sort of led me to study engineering is just this like fascination with the built environment. Which has obviously served me well now as a builder and beyond. There's definitely a lot of the fundamentals of engineering that you put into practice on a daily basis, whether you recognize it or not. And so, yeah, it was really good, really challenging, but super high rewarding. Um,
And
and
then
like
how long did you stay in after you got done school? Do you become an
I
officer?
yep. So by default, when you graduate from a service academy, you get commissioned as an officer. Um, And so I served from about 2009 to 2016 on active duty. And that's when I transitioned off of active duty. I stayed in the reserves for a couple years after that. So kind of in total, like 8.5 or so years of military service. But um, yeah, when you graduate from a service caddy, you immediately become an officer. You're commissioned as an officer to lead enlisted Marines or sailors, and depending on what you do determines kind of what your length of service is, because
Yeah.
different like service selections have different time commitments. For example, if you're going to become a pilot, oftentimes your minimum service commitment is 10 years, versus I only had kind of a minimum service commitment of 5 years. And I think when I originally sort of went down this military service path, I always actually saw myself as putting in a full kind of 20-year career. And my perspective didn't really change until on active duty. And I feel like I was able to get, a really good experience, a lot of leadership experiences that, I wouldn't trade the world for, and was able to accomplish everything that I set out to accomplish and get out of that experience. But there's this kind of dichotomy where it's really difficult to start a family and be a good
Yeah.
husband and a dad. And I have all the respect in the world for those families who can endure it all. But it was about the time, my wife Britt and I started getting serious about getting married and starting a family that I decided to exit active duty and kind of transition into the civilian world.
That's I feel like most people I know that went in like either enlisted in the military or went to one of like the military schools knew that they wanted to do that from like the time they were little, and it doesn't sound like that was a case for you.
No, it wasn't. And I had an older brother who went to St. Joe's in Philly.
Yeah.
And St. Joe's played Navy and lacrosse, and I must have been like probably a seventh or eighth grader, and it was the first time to Annapolis, and like that was what sparked it. Just like going on the yard, as they call it, the campus.
Yeah.
Prior to that, like there was the military was like not a part of my family. My dad wasn't in the military. Like, of course, my grandparents served, as probably many
Yeah.
of our grandparents did in that World War II generation. But it wasn't really a part of my upbringing, and it wasn't until I sort of like that seed was planted in me that I started exploring it further. And
So what are you like,
um,
39?
38 right now, about to be
38?
39. Yeah,
So then like you would have gone in like 9/11 was, I guess you were maybe middle school at that point, like 8th grade?
that was actually freshman year of high
Yeah.
school. Yeah, yeah,
Um, did that change anything for you or what
it
like did
did.
it?
It did. That's actually an interesting point you bring up because I think I had already formalized in my mind that I wanted to go to a service academy. Like they had this thing in our high school where you would write a letter to yourself your freshman year, like freshman orientation that you would open at graduation. I remember when I opened my letter to myself, it had, something to the effect of like, oh, I'd love to go to the Naval Academy and like play lacrosse
Mm.
and, become a pilot or something. So I think that it actually only, really stoked that fire a bit more. Like that call to service then was really strong. That was like, sadly, one of the last times our nation felt united,
Yeah.
which is unfortunately, I think, sad that that's what it took. But I was especially growing up in the DC area, on the East Coast, where that is a little bit more part of that culture, that
Hmm.
more traditional, old school service to others. I don't know that it was necessarily this like inflection point that, as I recall, but probably deep down subconsciously, it definitely did like only accelerate that trajectory for sure.
Yeah, I'm actually getting like chills thinking about it right now. I was a sophomore when that happened, and one of my buddies wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps. Like that was his dream from forever, and he did. But I can recall that time, and it's still, even at this point, being 40, to think a 15, 16-year-old man or girl or boy um, had the mindset when that happened to be like, I want to go serve my country. I feel we're so far from that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But like
Mm-hmm.
I had trouble. I was scared shitless when all of that happened. It's like, oh, they're gonna draft people, here my party's over. But then like to see young boys and girls who wanted to go serve in the military after that, I could never relate to it just from like, I feel like I didn't have the friggin' guts to do that. But it's pretty incredible to think about a 15, 16-year-old person being like, this is what I want to do. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
willing to give my life, my future for our nation, for our country, and go serve them, which is really
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm. I remember specifically on that day because the Pentagon was under attack, and I went to school near DC, not far from like where that was all taking place. And the goalie of our lacrosse team at the time, he was probably 16 or 17. At the middle of lunch, like the fire department came by our school and picked him up, and he was a volunteer firefighter, and like he went down to the Pentagon. I remember thinking like, holy
Holy
shit,
shit.
like Whitby just
Yeah.
went to like the Pentagon. He's like a year older than me. It
Yeah,
was, it was crazy.
that's nuts.
Were you
Yeah,
guys young for your class?
I
Because
think
I'm
so.
sitting
I
here,
would think
I
so.
was in seventh
When did you
grade.
graduate? 2005?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you, when's your
Okay, okay.
birthday?
September.
Yeah, so you're young. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I swore I was in seventh grade,
I was a sophomore.
but I
I have to
graduated
turn this light off.
2006,
Hold
so I
up.
guess I don't
So
know.
how old are you, Nick? You're
I'm
39,
38. No,
38.
yeah, 88, 88.
Yeah, so you were probably in eighth grade, or what
I
year did you
swore
graduate
I
high
was
school? 2006?
2006. Yeah,
Yeah, so you would have been eighth grade.
I guess I just in my mind, I remember exactly where I was. Like I was sitting in my history class, but I swore it was
Hmm.
seventh grade. But maybe he was my eighth grade teacher. I forget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I graduated 2004, so I was a sophomore.
It was crazy. I mean, not to relive that entirely, but I remember being in middle school and the middle school, they basically made an announcement saying that all the TVs were broken and not to turn the TVs on. Like
No
that's how
kidding.
the middle,
That's how they
no one,
reacted.
the entire middle school didn't know how to tell the kids, so they just were like, "Hey, TV, the networks are down. Please don't turn the TVs
Mm.
on." And then I got on the bus, and the bus was the middle school and high school kids, and the high school kids were like, "Dude, did you guys hear?" And no, like we had no idea. And um, and then I got home, and I'm just like, moseying up the driveway, and I walk in, and my parents are like sitting on the floor, in hysterics. I'm like, "What's going on?" And like, "You guys don't know?" I'm like, "No, we had a normal day at middle school." It was nuts.
Yeah, very
Was your college experience like I guess ignorant, you could say, to like what that experience is like going to the Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, but like in ways it's got to be similar to a traditional or a typical college education, but I would assume that it's a little bit more rigorous, right?
totally. It's I think probably the academics closely aligns to normal college or
Yeah,
university. Like you go to class, Monday through Friday, you follow the same semester. It's just the social life is not there.
yeah,
You're basically in the military. A midshipman or a cadet is technically like a rank, and you're indoctrinated into the military from day one. So there are aspects that are similar, but I smiled as soon as you said college experience because like
yeah.
it's definitely not like college,
Do you
but
stay there in the summer?
you actually you can. I mean, because the summers work differently, where you don't just get the summer off. You're supposed to go like do military training, and that's when they
Yeah.
expose you to all the different service selections you can do. So if you're interested in being a pilot, you become embedded with an aviation wing or something. You travel all around. You get a few weeks off, but some of the like summer training is in Annapolis, so there are
Yeah.
different blocks of training where you are there through the summer. Um, but yeah, it's a good place to be from. When you're there, you constantly question like, did
What
I
am I
make the
doing?
right decision?
Yeah.
But looking back, it's like I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was definitely a very formidable experience for sure. Not college, but what's interesting is like I was just talking with some buddies of mine. We went to dinner the other night who were on my lacrosse team, and it's almost like worse than normal college in some respects when it comes to the social life because you're so bottled up that whenever you do get the chance to like release all that social energy, you go so hard to the right.
Yeah.
Like I remember we would, hang out with like my friends that were at Loyola and Baltimore or University of Maryland, and they were always just like taken aback at like how hard guys from the Naval Academy would party because we were just letting it all out at once,
Mm.
which actually can be quite dangerous when you think about it.
Yeah.
A
So
little bit.
yeah, it was just like
not as
man,
conditioned.
there was no like third or fourth gear. It was either 0 or 7,000 RPMs.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Um,
look at it. I wonder. I don't think I'm quite fit for military life, but like the college experience for me, I wasn't really interested in the social aspect of it. I worked through college, and I feel that if you had the direction and you had the like academics, right? Because you need to be a good student to get into any of these schools in the first place, that like it would help maintain a certain path for you. And I think there's a lot of kids who probably could benefit from that more so than just like, hey, go to college and figure out who you want to be. Where it's like, all
totally.
right, I'm just gonna go party and spend a ton of money. Where like I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who could have benefited from the structure and the formality and not necessarily having summers off because that's what I did anyway. I just didn't have that much direction at that point.
Right, right.
But I
Yeah,
think that like joining the military really never crossed my mind. I just feel like I didn't have enough guts to be like, this is what I want to do.
for sure, for sure. I wouldn't say I was a kid who needed that level of structure, but it definitely helps. It puts you in a lane where it's I don't want to say a very predictable outcome, but that's sort of what it's designed to do is just sort of like break everyone down to the lowest common denominator so that the output at the end of the road is, very predictable. You've kind of shaped these officers or enlisted candidates, whether they're going through boot camp. And so I don't feel like I was the kid who needed it, but you're exactly right that the structure is, to a degree good for anyone.
Yeah. Did you
Has that
think that you wanted to be a mechanical engineer, like in a traditional sense, an engineer once you got done?
Not really, no. I mean, I think I wanted to build, and that felt like the most naturally aligned field of
Path.
study as opposed
Yeah.
to systems engineering or aeronautical engineering or something completely unrelated to engineering. Is that mechanical was, as a young, high schooler, didn't know much about anything. It just felt like, oh, this is the study of how things are put together.
Hmm.
Uh, which is very true to some sense, and it was more just that natural inclination to want to learn how to build, and
And was in your mind, was this like residential building, commercial building? Like what did you imagine?
hey, to be honest, Tyler, I couldn't tell you. I think that the aspiration to like want to be in construction faded pretty quick once I knew I was like, okay, I am gonna go into military service. Like,
Yeah.
let me figure out what I want to do in the military. And construction was always an afterthought, but I always continued to like find ways to build things and tinker and become a hobbyist carpenter. But the thoughts of like, what am I going to do with this field of study, it's sort of interesting because a lot of I didn't really rely on my engineering degree at all in the actual military, in military
Yeah.
service. Maybe I did in some ways that really was transparent to me, but um, yeah, I didn't really necessarily know that, oh, I'm studying engineering because I want to do this. It was more like I'm studying engineering because this is what interests me, you
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah, I did that too, and it was bio because science was the only thing I could tolerate in school. And
Hmm.
then when I was in it, I was like, well, I don't want to be a teacher, and I don't want to be a scientist. I'm like, what the hell am I?
Yeah.
And then it's like, yo, science is just math. Like you get into high level chem and physics, and it's just like all I do is math, and this is a terrible, terrible path that I chose. And then I dropped out and ended up going back to school. But it is funny, like it was basically I'm gonna pick something that I could tolerate, and it was a biology degree. And then when I was in it, I was like, this is not the path forward.
Yeah.
And I had to figure that path back out. So when you were already in San Diego, and were you married? Did you have kids on the way, or you said you were thinking of starting a family when you decided that you were going to get out of the military?
Yeah, I met my wife pretty early on out here. I had been stationed out here in 2009 and was going through training, and met my wife in maybe 2011. So she and I met like very early on that process, and God bless her, love her to death. But she was a trooper because the very early part of our dating relationship, I was probably gone for 30 out of 36 months in that first 3 years. It's a really difficult thing to grow a new relationship like right at the start of your military
Yeah.
service career. So no, moved out here, single, wasn't, and they always say when you're kind of going through training, like, try not to get yourself involved in a serious relationship early on because you're just not going to have the time for it. And I couldn't help myself upon meeting Britt, so it was just something. All right, I'm gonna have to figure this out. Like I can't not let this girl,
Yeah.
escape me. Um, and yeah, we sort of worked through it. She was with me every step of the way through all the training trips, all the deployments, and but it's a really tough thing when you decide that you want to get married and have kids. And like I said, I have all the respect in the world for the guys who are able to balance that. Um, but I think it was a combination of wanting to get serious about starting a family, and to be totally honest with you, I think I started to realize that I wasn't truly fit for like the big bureaucracy, like the
Yeah.
machine, so to speak. And I, got to the point that I realized, you know, I was very proud of the service, but at some point, I feel like I lost control of my own career trajectory, and
Yeah.
you're very much subject to the needs of the Navy, and they'll send you wherever they want to send you, and they'll put you in whatever position they want to put you in. And that is what they're looking for, is people that will, dedicate their life to service. And for me, I felt like I got to the point that I had, given as much as I could give before it became counter to all these other life goals and objectives I wanted to accomplish.
So what was the exit strategy? Did you have that like all situated before?
Not at all. I mean, it's a tough,
I
it's
feel
a
like
tough
that's
thing.
so scary to just be like, I want this massive life change. I'm going to get out of the military and I don't really know what I'm going to do. I mean, you have a great education. Like obviously you're leaving on good terms. Like you've set yourself up for success, but that's still super scary.
It is. And I see a lot of guys struggle through that transition because you define an identity for yourself. And if you don't know what that next chapter of your life looks like, a lot of guys are very afraid to like step into the unknown. And, they either as a result, stay in because they're kind of too afraid to commit to that unknown, or they get out and they have a hard time finding their way. It was admittedly sort of a bit of a dark time in my life too, because you are afraid that you're never going to find something that inspires you as much as the call to service did, and that you've essentially like peaked, and that's sort of like everything else after that doesn't seem to like spark that engine or spark that fire in your gut quite as much. And it definitely takes a lot of soul searching to like figure out how to come out onto the backside. Fortunately for me, I decided to just go to grad school because I didn't really have a good plan otherwise. And there was a couple of my peers who I really looked to, who were doing the same, and they just seemed like they had it figured out. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna, do the same. I'm gonna follow in these guys' footsteps. And you have such good veterans benefits following military service that like, why not take advantage of it? And so I went that route because it kind of provides like this additional couple year safety net. It was like, okay, I can go to graduate school where I know the next 2 years of my life are scripted out. So I can sort of like delay this question of what am I going to do next, while also at the same time getting to improve myself and learning a lot of the hard skills that you don't pick up in the military. And so that was essentially my exit strategy was, let me at least just go to school, which I advocate for it, to military service members getting out for that exact reason. It's like, if you don't know what you want to do, go use your veterans benefits and go study something and acquire the skills that the military didn't give you. And like, that's a breeding ground for you to be able to try and figure it out and get better compass bearing. And so that was sort of like the path that I followed. And it wasn't until I got there at grad school, I went to school in Chicago, that I really started anchoring down on, how do I get back into the building community? Like, how do I get back into construction? It was like, let me circle back to all these like things that I felt as a young kid, all these interests and passions. I sort of knew after military service and, while in grad school, that I really only had like three buckets I was trying to check. Is like, I wanted to do something building related. I wanted to be in small business because I just wanted to get away from just, being part of a giant global organization where there's just a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape. And I wanted to live in San Diego, more specifically Coronado, if we could figure it out. Because like I said, my wife Britt is from San Diego, and we both became accustomed to this place when we were dating, and we just knew early on, like, this would be an awesome place to like raise kids and start a family. So those are sort of the boxes we were trying to check. And it wasn't that's ultimately how I ended up in custom residential construction. I ended up getting a job after grad school for a custom home builder who worked in Coronado. He was also a fellow alumni of the Naval Academy, much older gentleman. And he and I hit it off, and I moved right back here after grad school to essentially get into custom home building. And from there, that was in 2017. From there, it was like, I just couldn't get enough of it. I mean, I was just eating, sleeping, breathing all things home building from that point on. And to be honest, that's sort of like when I first started listening to you guys in the Modern Craftsman podcast, which, if I'm not mistaken, is right about when you guys got this started,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were like 29, 30, wrapping up or going to grad school. Like that's the age range.
Yep.
Where'd you go to grad school?
I went to University of Chicago's business school. It's called Booth.
Yeah.
Really great program. My wife, Britt, is an acupuncturist, and so she was going to school here in San Diego, and her school had a campus in Chicago. And so naturally, when I applied to that school and got accepted, it was just too convenient. For 2 years, like, we didn't have kids yet. We were able to like walk to class together. We timed up our schedule so we'd both go to school together and meet up afterwards and come home. And we were just like young without kids, living the big city life. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But we always knew it was short lived, and so that's where our first son Jack was actually born. So our son Jack was born in Chicago right before we moved back to San Diego. So that is where we got our family started. So we always will have a special place in our hearts for Chicago. He's sort of like a pseudo Cubs fan now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Better than the Padres.
Yeah, right. I know we're struggling right now.
That's cool. I like, so I have a handful of friends who are in the military, and I often wonder, so many of them, and I think this is the case not necessarily for people in the military, but just like continuing their education to prolong having to make a decision as to what path they want to take in life. And like, is it a good thing to be getting done essentially like one career and then being like, well, now you have an opportunity to try and prolong having to take the next step? Because I think for some people, like for yourself, obviously it was a great stepping stone and you went to a great school and it was a business degree and like it directly relates to what you're doing now. But I think that a lot of people, whether it's through the military or through their parents helping them get through school or just taking out more student loans to enroll in more schooling, it's just prolonging them having to be like, I need to be a real person and be a real adult and get a real job. And like, is it actually helpful? And obviously in your case, it sounds that it was.
Yeah. And I'm, of course, man, I think about this all the time. Like, I'm of course biased because I'm a product of higher education, but I recognize that I took a unique path because I didn't have to pay for my schooling, like economically speaking. I was able to go through that path with zero debt. So it's hard for me to advocate for that for everyone because I had completely different financial circumstances. But
and they're helping you out with like living expenses and
totally,
stuff too.
Totally. Yeah. So when you go, you get like a living stipend. It's great. I mean, and for the most part, you can get your tuition covered, if all of it, if not close to it. So it changes that calculation completely. But for most people who aren't military service members or a veteran, like they're dealing with the reality of how expensive it is, and they have to basically mortgage their life to be able to go afford education. That's the sad reality of higher ed in our country right now. But on the other hand of it, I also recognize just how much of like an accelerator that was.
From a life perspective or like business perspective in hindsight.
Kind of all things, Tyler. I mean, probably more so from a business perspective. Like, I feel like the military service part was the accelerator that like turned me from a boy into a man. And then obviously the business school was the accelerator that just propelled me through my actual professional career or really slingshot me through it, particularly in, construction, because it's not a prerequisite to go to grad school, let alone college or even high school. And so I tend to think that like, if you have the ability to put yourself in a position where you can, educate yourself or go to higher ed, and you can do it sort of like, economically without having to take hundreds of K of debt, like it really does slingshot you forward. Because I don't know, I have sort of like a counterculture opinion on, I think, what it's going to take to attract the next generation of, craftsmen and tradesmen to this industry. And there's just this overwhelming rhetoric of, don't go to college, don't go to, educate yourself. And I understand why that is. I mean, from an economic perspective, but at the same time, I think that it's missing a piece of that equation because what I see that we're ultimately doing is just sort of like lowering the bar, so to speak. Like I'm
Yeah.
kind of this perspective that, hey, if we want to actually grow a strong population of the next generation of tradesmen and craftsmen, we actually need to raise the bar. We need
Yeah.
to raise the standard. And so that's not to say you should swing that conversation back the other way and say everyone should go to college, but it should be, if you're not going to go to college, that's great, but go professionalize yourself at a trade school or something else. Like, don't just discount education because it's too expensive, because education is the most valuable thing you could give yourself. You take it with you for the rest of your life and no one can take it from you. And I don't know how I got on this thought stream, but
So, I mean, do you think that like a lot of those principles and lessons from your academic careers, specifically the masters that you got in business, you are able to implement into your business today, like residential building, custom building?
100%,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
See, and like that's where I think the big difference is. I think a lot of people go to school and for years, for 20 years, it was like just go get a business degree. And it was getting them through school. But to be able to go and be 30 years old and have some accountability and be mature and grown up and understand that you're going to school to be able to learn lessons and experience life, I think at 30 is much different than at 18. And to understand, like in the back of your head, that you want to do more with this information, with this experience, I think is a much different equation than just saying, "Hey, I'm 18, go get a general business degree."
You're exactly right. And when I went to grad school, like I was the type of student that I went to every class, did every assignment, because you're there to like gather the skills and put it to work, as opposed to, you're exactly right, at a different phase of your life when you're not in that mindset. You're going to college and half of it, if not the majority of it, is the social experience, and the academics tend to fall by the wayside for most. So that's a very good point. But yeah, it has been a complete difference maker in my opinion. Like I couldn't imagine being, in the position I feel like I'm in now and having, been able to start my own venture and get to where we are without having had the hard, like finance and accounting education behind it that, so many builders in our industry really struggle to grasp. It's just outside their core competency. And so, I'm a big proponent in that regard, is that the skill sets I picked up in grad school are immediately translatable and applicable.
Mm-hmm.
I think the perspective of like raising the bar, I think, is really important, because that argument, I wrote an article that went super viral a couple of years ago about how it was like college sucks, a case for the trades or something like that. And ultimately, like I kind of circled or kind of backpedaled and said, college is great. It's just not set up for the trades. And I think that the perspective that you're alluding to is, I agree. The bar needs to be raised, and we're generally saying you don't need a higher education. You can just start a company because the bar is so low. But the problem is like a lot of people get into business and then it's, I don't know how to run a business. But to kind of expand on the argument in the case of not going to colleges, that unfortunately there's just no schooling for it. And I think that's the bigger issue, is that the trades are seeing a lack of education. So in your case, like the MBA in learning business, I mean, I think it's really smart. I think, as Tyler was just alluding to, you had some more accountability. You were later in your life to know that, hey, this is going to be applicable to running a business. And, I think it's funny listening to both of you guys talk about the social aspect of college, because I also didn't really, I stayed one weekend the entire time I was in college. I would go out one night a week. And other than that, I would drive 80 miles to my job and work for 2 days and then turn around and drive 80 miles back. And it was just like, I just wanted to work. And in even looking back at that, I still wasn't like uber responsible. I just wanted money. Like I wasn't really furthering my career path or really thinking about the fact that I was eventually going to start a business. I was just kind of, working and doing school because I knew like one of them would eventually get me what I wanted. So it is, I think it's, for anyone listening, it is this idea that, higher education can really help with what many of us struggle with, and that's running the business and understanding the business side of building.
How do you think your education has, like, other than, financial or finances and accounting and taxes and bookkeeping, like, how do you feel that has given you an edge? And I guess I'm asking this because when I went back to school, I went for construction management. Even by the time I graduated, I was 23. And I'm looking back on the education of it, and the curriculum was based on commercial construction. So I even feel walking away from that so much of that didn't help me in my career. And I think I probably could have benefited from more business related or entrepreneurial type of classes. But like, how did that education benefit you now when it wasn't necessarily tailored to like a small niche building industry?
Yeah, very good question. And I think that's sort of where I got into construction, having had this very formal educational background on here's what a business should look like. Here's what you need to know to understand the inner workings of a business engine and how it should work and how you grow it, et cetera, et cetera. And I got into construction, and kind of like the first thing that stood out to me was just how all of that like sort of went by the wayside. Like I started to see that the way construction companies were organized and run didn't fit the mold of what I was just kind of educated on and how it should look. It was just immediately this like stark contrast. And it didn't really resonate with me too early because I was just very focused on actually learning how to build, how to understand the sticks and bricks of construction, so to speak. But I was very fortunate that the builder I went to work for, interestingly, had structured his business under a completely different financial structure, a completely different accounting structure.
Than what you knew, or than what was typical in the industry?
Than what is typical in the industry. And it was a product.
Did you know that though?
No,
like,
I didn't.
You thought that this was like standard. Like
I thought it was standard. I thought it was standard. And come to find out, it was really just, it's sort of exclusive to California and more specifically San Diego, where the builder that I went to work for, and I came on board as his CFO, C-suite title in a very small business.
Love it.
Right? I was like, oh man, like I'm gonna update my LinkedIn right away. I was gonna say
the link you put CFO on LinkedIn, or like mine says CEO. It's like, I see that you're a CEO. I'm like, yeah, I
know. It was all silly, but so I didn't know it, and it was what I learned from day one. And basically, my career became this sort of like tale of two business models, where I'm learning the inner workings of this building business model based on the building business that I became a part of, which is ultimately the way I structure my own business, while at the same time trying to immerse myself in all things residential construction, to include, following you guys very closely, where I'm hearing all these conversations from builders everywhere else who are dealing with this like struggle of living in these really complex financial operations, and these conversations about what it means to run a business in the construction industry and all the implications of it, all the while seeing like this custom home builder that I was working for more or less be free from a lot of these pain points and struggles. And when I was able to sort of like overlay my MBA brain on top of that, is really when I started to see, there's there's something unique about the way that this business model works. It's way more in line with all of the fundamentals of running a business that I've been sort of classically trained to understand. Sort of everywhere else I look, it's just like it doesn't exist. And to like explain it more precisely, it really comes down to the flow of money. And the business that I went to work for operated on top of what's called a construction fund control architecture. Meaning, in California, and almost more exclusively in San Diego, there are these very niche financial service businesses that essentially act as an escrow before construction. So for every project you take on, you can open a dedicated trust account specifically for that project that allows you to hold your client's funds in that account, not all at once, but just, in small chunks, just like, you would if you were to accept a deposit. And when invoices come due, you cost code them to a budget just like you otherwise would, but you can deploy funds immediately from that project account directly to the intended recipient. And that was what I came to learn from day one. And as I went through my building career and started to gain more exposure to the rest of the industry, I started to realize just how unique that was. And that changes everything about the way a business is structured and how it
So
runs.
like the money's there, you're not waiting to get the money.
Correct.
Like essentially there's an escrow with funds in it for future work.
Absolutely.
You had said something on our call a couple weeks ago, and I'm just going to repeat it back to you because this is what, like when you said this, I was like, holy shit. This was what kind of broke my brain. But you had the analogy that a real estate broker doesn't run buyer escrow funds through their personal checkbook. And the real estate industry decided that was too risky decades ago. But construction has never made that decision. And that, so in other words, like I had another example written down here, but like a builder can run a $3 million of project money through their books, but they're only earning $600K.
Right.
So the $3 million and the $600K commingle. So
Right.
you end up taking a bunch of money and then you disperse most of it right back out.
Right.
And it's like when you say it and especially when you make the comparison to real estate, it's like, this is so simple. Like you should just be taking it like ultimately we're all, in some ways most of us are fee-based businesses.
Mm-hmm.
We work for the fee. Now, the argument that I think a lot of people would have is number one, well, it's like, well, now my revenue is deflated. I'm not a $10 million builder anymore. I'm a $1 million builder. And okay, well, like, there's the ego part of that. There's the lending part of that, which will come back to lending. And then, and then the reality of like most builders, like going back to not understanding how to run a business, get into these cash flow issues, which then you get into the robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then it's just like this perpetual hole that is dug until either you fix it or you kind of just let it explode. And this like physically prevents that from happening because you never allow that money to commingle.
Dude, thank God you didn't stay in Chicago. Imagine like, dude, it'd have been terrible. You'd be like every other builder.
Yeah. Well, actually, interestingly, it's funny you say that, and I'll circle back to this in maybe a few minutes. But interestingly, Chicago is one of the marketplaces that operates much the same way. But
damn! Well, then you're fine.
Yeah, right.
Mike Connolly's.
Dude, what are the chances?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's
He's like, listen, buddy.
Yeah, Mike Connolly's great. But I guess to go back to your question, Tyler, like I that was the realization I had was that, hey, fundamentally, these businesses all across the country that don't have access to this sort of financial infrastructure are forced to operate in a way that doesn't replicate what a traditional business model should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I just continue to like pick away at why that was. Like, why is it that this industry operates unlike any other? And I've heard the two of you echo these like sentiments over the years where Nick, you've always said like how it strikes you that there's no standard operating procedure. There's no standard for the way a project's, finances run.
Hmm.
And on the same note, Tyler, you've always expressed things that I deeply resonate with where you're like, why is it that like we have to finance a project? Like, why does
Hmm.
our industry accept that like we become the ones to capitalize the cost of the work and the materials to like get paid back in arrears? And I think that it was about halfway through my building career, I got overwhelmed by like these all of the like totality of the data points I was seeing that suggested that the construction industry is actually missing a fundamental piece of infrastructure that all of these other stabilized industries have evolved to adopt to move money in a far more efficient, transparent, and secure way. And that's sort of where that real estate analogy comes in, Nick, because like just if you were to break it down into like its simplest form, right? Take a builder who's running, a $2 million project, right? And let's say they're a full service general contractor like we are, which by the way, like that is how my business runs. Like we're not just like a construction manager. We are a full blown licensed general contractor. We
Hmm.
subcontract with trades, the whole thing. Our license is on the line. We warranty everything. We've got risk on the line. But if you are a builder who's running like a $2 million project, and just for the sake of argument, you are going to charge, cost plus 20%, or you're charging a 20% fee for the service that you offer, you're a construction management and supervision. So you're going to have a $2.4 million project. And all $2.4 million is going to come into your business's financial statements. It's going to come across your profit and loss as top line revenue, 2.4, even though $2 million of it is essentially entitled and belongs to other recipients. And so when you look at the ratio of the amount of money a builder is trying to manage that is organically theirs versus the amount of money they're trying to manage that is actually custodial in nature and belongs to someone else, basically the way that those margins work is if your cost plus 20%, that you're only earning like a 16% gross margin, right? I'm rounding some decimal points here, but 400K out of 2.4 is only a 16% gross margin. And not only is the lion's share of the money moving through your business belong to someone else, but the ratio of transactions is also overwhelming, where that $2 million is probably moving through your business across, like on one single project, maybe hundreds of transactions. You're probably going to disperse it to anywhere between 50 and 100 different entities across several hundred transactions.
Hmm.
So if you were to take like the ledger of that one project and you're trying to figure out like the profitability of that 16% slice, but you've got the other 84 piled on top of it, and your business is the shock absorber that absorbs the timing of all those inflows and outflows, like that becomes a really tricky accounting problem for even one single project. But then you try to layer on other units of business, the second project, the third project, the fourth project, and you get to the point that a builder's running a $12 million business, but $10 million is moving through their financial statements, and they've essentially become like an unlicensed escrow agent. And you're trying to see the profitability of your business, but there's so much activity on top of it that just distorts all of your financials that you have a really hard time understanding if your underlying, fee for the product or service that you perform is even profitable. And that's where like I use this term that I call the fatal funnel. So in my military career, I spent in special operations, and if you were to like whenever we would train in like gunfights in a room, right, bullets would always converge at doorways, right? So if you look at like two rooms in plan view that has a doorway and there's people shooting guns on either side, the path of the bullets form like this hourglass type shape, and the doorway is what we refer to as the fatal funnel. And all of your tactics are designed around neutralizing and moving through the fatal funnel. Like you don't ever find yourself caught in a doorway. That's where you get wounded or killed. And I say that the shape of the construction pay chain is a lot like a fatal funnel where builders are having to ingest millions of dollars from across a wide variety of sources that all converge on their business, that usually move in and out of a single operating account before the lion's share of it has to get shot through, to downstream recipients. And their business is acting as the shock absorber to manage all of that cash flow, when at the end of the day, they're just trying to figure out whether or not they're making enough money to pay for their own organic operating, expenses. And what I've come to find is that largely many other industries have evolved to prevent this structure from taking place. And that's where that real estate analogy comes in. Is like, imagine if a real estate broker was the financial middleman. And as you transacted a home, the funds moved from buyer to seller through the broker's business. And they're doing, $30-40 million worth of volume. And it's all running through a single operating account. And the real estate broker essentially acts as the escrow, but they don't really have the tools to do it the right way. And you could quickly, very easily see how the real estate industry would sort of devolve into kind of like a bit of a financial quagmire, like I feel like the construction industry is stuck in. Because
even that being said, though, it would still be far less convoluted and more transparent to see profitability just based on the number of transactions within that single transaction for like a real estate person, right? Where like a business, right? One job that's $2 million, you have 100 different vendors and subs that you're playing. Like on the real estate end of things, a $2 million sale is one $2 million sale. So like, yeah, it still would be an issue, but like our industry is 100 times worse than that.
Totally.
On top of that.
Totally. It's like the transactions in a construction project are way more complex.
Correct.
Like there's way more people involved. They're not static in nature. They take place over, years. They're moving up and down. It's not a static target. And I like constantly think like I've got a client we're building for right now that they purchased their property for $5 million and we're building their house for $5 million. And it's just this like perfect like microcosm of like, you look at what would happen if that homeowner moves through the real estate transaction and they acquire this property for $5 million and there's all sorts of structure around it. There's a standard operating procedure, as Nick always says, and no one is having to front the money. There's this financial structure that allows that transaction to take place in a fast, secure, and transparent way. And then you could immediately get to the other side of it where $5 million of construction is supposed to take place. And it's like the wild, wild west. It's like none of that structure exists to move money in that same manner. And as a result, it's like the builders, I feel like, that end up being the ones to bear the brunt of having to play a role they were never designed to play. And
so I have a couple thoughts, and they're incomplete thoughts. Number
What's
one,
new?
like I'm just announcing it now. The last point you just said, like the role that they never were meant to fill, I agree. Like that is something that you get in this to build, and then all of a sudden now you're a money manager. The comparison to real estate is, you're basically handling a transaction, and there's not really a physical good that you're dealing with. Where as a builder, your cost of goods are part of the business. So I'm sitting here like thinking about other industries, and like let's look at the car industry. That car industry takes all of that money, and they're dealing like it's part of their cost of goods. It goes on their P&L, like, and then they look at it holistically. I guess where I'm coming from is, trying to argue against what you're proposing, because I agree. I think like this makes a lot of sense. But why would someone say no? Like, I actually don't like this. I want all the money coming in. Besides let's remove the idea of like surviving through like robbing Peter to pay Paul and dealing with bad business, and let's remove the idea of like, hey, if I get to bring in money, I can hold it for a week and throw it in a sweep account and make some, like, all of that. Why else would someone argue and say no, I don't want to do this?
Because I think that when you are in the flow of funds, by default, you feel like you have a position of power and control.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's probably the biggest driving force is that when you control the pot of money, you're the quarterback that gets to decide how things
Mm,
happen, when things happen. That's
yeah.
probably the biggest natural objection aside from, like you said, all those sort of incidental benefits. You're getting
Yeah.
credit card points and you're clipping interest on a, money market account.
I didn't even think of the credit card. Yeah.
I
And
kind of feel like it's just it comes down to understanding your profitability without all of that, like all of those other numbers that are convoluting your profitability, like you said. Like you have to distill it down to understand the money that you need to make, and most people don't,
Right.
and they're unsure of that, so they just want all of it and then they'll figure it out on the back end. And like
Yeah. They,
one of the things that I was concerned with, where you're like, I started my business in California, I understand business. Then you're going to start a residential construction company, and now you're not going to be able to compete with everyone because you're actually creating numbers that are profitable, and you've priced yourself out of the market. Because I feel that 95% of residential builders and contractors don't know if they're making money or how much they're making, and we're underpricing and devaluing work. Where if you actually know what your numbers are, it's like you have to lead into every conversation with, I'm going to be more expensive because you're actually making money. And like it seems as though you luckily came into a situation where the numbers do make sense, you understand your profitability, and you don't necessarily need $2 million of that running through your business to keep every other job and every other aspect of your business afloat.
yeah,
the other
I
thing sorry, Shane, the other thing I'd add there is I think some of these businesses, when you are making the credit card points or you are sweeping money and making interest on the money that you're holding, all of that ends up on your bottom line. So your business almost like, you know, looks more profitable than it really is because you're taking advantage of these other things where if you were truly only looking at the profit that you're making, I mean it's with anything. Like if you're looking at, hey, this is how much money I made on a regular basis and you're not having to spend time running whip reports and really like looking like it's just you end up people end up not doing it, myself included, where it's like I don't have the time to do this, like I know we're good and it's like are we good and like
hmm
how good or if
hmm
or like if we're not, like how bad are we? Where I'm going with that is it would force you to be better with money.
hmm
And, Tyler, to argue against what you just said, it might force you to be better with money so much that don't, you aren't more expensive because you've found efficiencies.
hmm
Where it's like, hey, like naturally, like your pricing keeps going up because you are trying to counteract the fact that last year you weren't profitable, but instead it's just because your flow is wrong.
hmm
Where it's like if you remove the all of the noise and you're just solely
hmm
focused on the fact that here's what I'm making, here's my profit, here's my fee, here's my expenses, this is what's left over, and you're looking at that like super black and white, you're like, you know what? Fuck it, like get rid of all these expenses. Like this actually isn't helping my business.
You nail
Like
it.
stop paying the credit card fees. Like because sure I get the points, but like if I don't do that, I actually just have more cash.
You nail it. So I want to go back to a previous point you made on the auto industry and the mental model of like, should these cost of goods like belong within a business? And
Mm,
I tend to think that like that mental model doesn't necessarily apply to what we do, where we're building these custom homes where sort of everything is unique, right? We're not building a repeatable product where you can amortize these cost of goods with large volumes and get these sort of economies of scale. We're building these sort of like one-off products where on the front end too, we know that those costs are custodial in nature. We're stepping into a project knowing that, back to that $2 million example, hey, 2 million of this 2.4 is actually belongs to these other independent corporate entities that have their own licenses, their own business structures, right? That's sort of a different mental model given the industry that we're in, as opposed to like a model where it's purely like, manufacturing based,
Mm.
is kind of how I think about it. And then the second part of that is, Nick, like you nailed it, man. Like I go back to that example where you've got a builder who's running, a $2 million project and they're charging a 20% fee for their construction management. Well, now put 5 projects together. They'll have $10 million worth of the cost of the work, the
Mm-hmm.
actual sub-trade cost materials, with a $2 million kind of total fee structure on top of that. In that business model, all $12 million is running through that P&L, and you're just sort of like caught in that sort of financial tornado, and you're relying on working capital products to, hedge these cash flow gains, versus in the model that I became accustomed to learning and knowing, the only thing that comes into the P&L is that $2 million, and the other 10 million flow around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to break my business down into I learned this model at business school called the unit model, where you break a business down into its most fundamental unit of business, which for me is a house, building a house, a project. Where when I take a look at a project, I can very clearly cost out what my resources and expenses are going to take to basically administer that project and deliver the management and the supervision that we need. And I can also price in, hey, here's a fair reward to earn for the risk that we bear. And I generate revenue based off of that calculation. I can now see perfectly clearly whether or not that calculation is in check, because I've got none of this other distortion moving across the business that's going to affect it. And to your point is that as you grow, because I really think that there's a bit of a like misnomer in construction too, where I tend to feel like the term like scaling your business kind of gets overused or misapplied, where in the truest sense of that word, a business that can scale is one that expands its profit margin as it grows, because the
Mm-hmm.
product or the unit that it's producing has a very low to no cost of replication, right? But for what we do, for every single unit of business we add, at least in my business, if I want to add and build another house, I've got a commensurate amount of expense that goes with it. And my profit margin can't expand unless I actually raise prices. And what I feel like a lot of builders fall victim to is they can't see that profitability perfectly clearly. So as they are growing, they're starting to add resources and costs that are actually compressing their margin. And they get to that point where now they have, $12 million worth of volume, but they've actually really compressed their profitability because they weren't able to see how it impacted each unit of business along the way. And that's kind of why you always hear builders say like, oh, I was making more money at this level
That's
of volume
every
than the other.
builder. Like that's
Exactly.
every single builder.
It's not, and I'm in that position right now where we have 6 projects and I have 5 full-time project managers, and every unit of business, each one of those 6 projects, more or less the economics look exactly the same, right? We're charging cost plus. We're like cost plus 16.5%, depending on the project. It's still a highly competitive marketplace out here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's allowed me to grow in a way that I actually have not needed to bring on additional overhead, meaning because all of that like $10 million doesn't flow through the business, I've been able to grow to a point where I don't have to have all of these financial resources running our P&L. Like I don't have a bookkeeper. I don't have a controller. I use my CPA at tax time when we have to file our taxes that are way simpler. And as a result, I've been able to keep our business very lean and mean, which means when I go to price work, I can actually tell clients, like I lean into this in my sales rhetoric, that this is a model that has allowed me to understand my profitability, where I can afford to price very efficiently because I don't have probably on the order of magnitude of $200,000 worth of additional overhead that I would have if I was trying to be the bank and running all the funds through it.
Yeah.
And so it's a tremendously valuable like position to be in from a business owner, but it's one that I also lean into in my sales rhetoric with clients as well, because I sort of like speak to all those pitfalls and I tell them, hey, this is the structure upon which my business is built. And when we launch this project, you're going to have a dedicated trust account where your funds can go and no one else is going to be able to touch them. They're not going to get commingled with other projects. And the cost of that service, you are going to pay for, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, because that is the cost of the financial infrastructure to move your money in a very secure and transparent way. Mm-hmm. And the cost of that is so minimal relative to the investment that they are making that it becomes kind of a no-brainer decision to them. For one, there's a tremendous amount of value in it. But what I tell them is like, hey, if our next best alternative in lieu of this is for you to basically send all of your project funds through my business, and I have to take on a complete additional layer of overhead and expense to be able to manage that, such that the cost I have to charge you is going to actually be more. And it's just going to bring on problems in the business that I don't want to deal with. And
I mean, the amount of people, like I had a client last year. This is where I think it's a huge sell to the homeowner, is that I had a client last year. It was a smaller job for us. It was about $1 million. And, we're on site, we're interviewing. He's asking a bunch of questions and he looks me dead in the eye. First time anyone's ever asked. He goes, "Are you financially stable?" And I was like, yeah. Like, even if I wasn't, like, what would I say in that moment? Like, oh no, we're a train wreck. But I was like, yeah. And he goes, all right, just making sure. I've dealt with, contractors, and we have a client right now that interviewed us and really wants to move forward and has been asking very similar questions. Mm-hmm. And when, we chatted, I'm like, this is what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. Oh wait, all of this is hyper controlled, hyper secure. Mm-hmm. It's one account for this project, and because everyone has a horror story. Mm-hmm. We have a client right now. It's like, they're asking about our 45 White Oak investment, and it's like, hey, how does that impact your day-to-day business? And they want to make sure it's separate, and it's like a separate LLC, blah blah. And because they're like, we had our last builder, went belly up on a development project and literally just disappeared one day.
Fails all this time. I mean, the industry has been struggling with this problem for quite a while, and segregating the capital is part of it. Like, that definitely helps. That cleans up the audit trail, so to speak.
Yeah.
But really the bigger piece of it is actually getting those funds that don't truly belong to you off of your balance sheet. That's what's going to allow you to see the profitability of your business. Yeah. That's what provides the financial protection to your project owners. That's what provides the speed of payment from, who owes it to who has earned it. And I got to this point where I really just became obsessed with, seeing, again, the structure upon which I was able to build my own business. And it's not to say, oh, I'm doing it right and everyone else is doing it wrong. It was really just, hey, there's this very unique financial mechanism that I have access to that solves all of these problems that I'm hearing builders and the industry struggle with, like conversations I've heard endlessly on Modern Craftsman. And I really just started to, at the same time, I'll have you that the financial services business that my business is built on top of, they're like a third-party fund controller, and it is brutal working with them. I mean, they are an old legacy mom and pop shop. It was first there was Pong, then there was Tetris, then came this fund control business. File cabinets, dusty office, good Americans, good human beings, but it's a relic of the past. And my project manager and I spend an exorbitant amount of time administering this funding process because it's all pen and paper and it's just not digital. And despite having to bash our heads into the wall every time we want to run a draw request, the accounting architecture of it is second to none. I wouldn't go without it. It's literally, to me, it's a no criteria. I would rather honestly do something else within the field of construction than to try and put my business back in a position where we are bringing all the funds in house. And if that is something that, a builder thinks that they can handle because they have the competency to do it, they have the tools to do it, and they think that the reward or the incidental benefit that they can earn from being directly in the flow of all that money is is value add, then like by all means, like go for it. But what I have seen and heard largely is that there is a critical mass of builders who are looking for some other solution, and they're looking for a way to not have to exist in this fatal funnel, because it really doesn't just affect the builder. I mean, it extends to project owners, lenders, subcontractors, suppliers. Like this pay chain that we've inherited, where money has to go like from the top of the food chain all the way down to the bottom, where you play this game of financial telephone, like that, it's not by design. Like no one intentionally said this is the best way for this industry to operate. It's kind of just like how it's evolved, and now the industry is so hyper fragmented that it doesn't make sense at all. We got to figure out a different way to move money, and that's what set me off on this path to say there's got to be a way that we can take all of these like intuitive modern day financial tools that allow you to move money instantaneously, whether that be the PayPals, the Venmos, you name it, and build this modern intuitive interface that's purpose built for construction, and set it on top of this fundamentally different accounting architecture below, where now you can actually create internal financial controls in a business, and you can see the full picture of your business, and you can see every single project and the sum total of dollars flowing through it. But now the only thing that actually comes into your operating account is your organic fee for this, service you provide. And to back to your previous point, Nick, about like, well, I was a $12 million builder and now I'm a $2 million builder. And, everyone talks about revenue because it is sort of like, it's a big number. It's maybe egotistical in nature, but really what's more important is kind of like, you've heard the phrase, it's not what you make, it's what you take home. But
Yeah.
to that point, I still think of my business. I still think of myself as a, $12 million builder. Like
Sure.
we'll probably, depending on a couple projects we have in the pipeline and whether those get started in Q4 or whether they push to Q1, we'll probably do, 13 to 14 million in volume this year. And I still think of my business through those terms, because you have to ultimately understand whether the reward you are earning, whether the profit you are collecting is fair and commensurate with the total amount of risk you are sort of putting on the line, which is, another thing that I think very long and hard about, is that I have this kind of building philosophy where, in my kind of sales rhetoric to clients, the way that I'm able to sort of like push our product forward and elevate is that I tell them like, hey, if we are able to build this project in such a way that we can use the best trades, the best materials, we can use the best building practices, and we can put forth the house that we know we can stand behind, that theoretically allows me to lower my long-term risk. I'm comfortable charging a much tighter construction management fee if we are able to build in this manner. And it's sort of like kind of a no-brainer situation for someone who's investing in a multi-generational property. So my point being is that you still need to understand the totality of the volume, because I'm constantly assessing, hey, this net profit margin that I'm making in my business, is that fair and commensurate with the $13.5 million of construction we're putting forth, given the quality and the caliber that we're putting out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think that, from a lending perspective or even a bank perspective, they just want to see that you're profitable.
Correct.
They don't care, what your top line is. And truthfully, you're absolutely right. Like, you're still a $13 million or $12 million builder. You just have this tool that basically, before it gets to your bank, it's like, wait a second, before we commingle, let me separate what's yours and not yours. And that's it. It's just like, it's really that, it's really that simple.
And there's just so many things that builders struggle with that completely go away in this model. The first one being understanding profitability and WIP.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't tell you what a WIP report is, what it looks like, how to do it. It's just sort of It's absolutely
like cash forecasting, or the how many jobs you have going on, how much money's going in and out, what belongs where, what's your money. It's just like, I think that's what people, it ends up diluting their profitability or just really blurring what they think is theirs, right? Where it's like, I have $1 million in the bank, we're good to go. And it's like, actually $10,000 of that is your profit. Like
it's like when all that money moves through your business, given that each project has its own unique timing of inflows and outflows, and whether you accept a deposit and now you've got the capital on hand, or whether you are fronting the cost of the work and collecting in arrears, all of those unique differences in timing create this scenario where a business's financial statements are in a constant state of distortion, like literally at all times, unless you do a WIP adjustment. But the moment you deviate from that and add another transaction or another transaction, that WIP adjustment is already inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
So what builders are having to do is constantly play catch up, where at any given time, their financial statements are distorted unless they do some financial gymnastics and all this reporting, just to figure out what profitability is in that moment, let alone be able to forecast where it will be next month, 3 months, 2-3 quarters.
Yeah, or if they take on another job.
Right.
Like, or we want to do one more job. And that's the conversation I have with so many people, where it's like, you think that you're going to be more profitable because you're taking on more work. You don't know your profitability right now. So why is taking on more work going to help you? It's only going to complicate things. And then, like, the other thing I'm always telling people is the more business savvy you become, the more expensive you're going to become, because you're going to be realizing how much money you're leaving on the table. And it like, even with your model, right, you're now able to compete with other people, but you don't have the financial overhead of these other companies. So your profitability is higher than other companies at the same markup that you're pricing a job at, right? So like, that's where you're actually coming to the table. And yeah, I'm competitive with everyone else, but my profit margin is actually much higher because I have a much lower overhead.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I had another thought I was going to respond to that, but it's escaping me right now.
I mean, you're kind of like completely speaking my language. I do things similar. It's different at the same time, but like, essentially the money's going through my company. It's not as much, being that I'm not doing a ton of revenue, but I'm always looking to be spending my clients' money. It is going through my company, but it's always like, I'm always ahead, and then we're billing against that money. And it's very straightforward based on the amount of work that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So I know what money is actually mine each and every month. I always tell people, like, I don't know how you would do it if you did more work. Obviously, your model is something that works, which is, I mean, Nick, I don't know if you recall when we walked Mike Alliance's job, ECS, like years ago.
Yes.
And he basically, like, we were talking about how he was making money, and he's like, I don't run anything through my company. I charge a set fee per month to be on their job. Yeah. And like, it was a bit of a workaround, right? He didn't have like a separate account set up. He was basically just like, my clients pay all subs directly, and I just have a management fee each and every month. And he was like, I just know every month that I'm managing a job that, like, this is how much I'm making. If they add a change order, I don't care if it doesn't add to my scope of work. If it adds to my scope of work, then my management fee goes up. But otherwise, he's like, I'm not running millions of dollars through my business. I'm just getting paid a monthly fee. And everyone was like, well, I just can't imagine leaving, like, there's so much potential money that you're leaving on the table. And he's like, I know what I'm making every month.
Now you have all this additional overhead to track it.
What I would also say in that example is, like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that that's an appropriate strategy if you are a full service licensed general contractor where you have
he had
skin in
issues
the game,
with
you know?
the exact way he was doing it. Like, he's since changed it, but like, the premise is there.
Well, it's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because maybe this is how we'll circle back to Chicago, Mike Connolly, because what I started to see is all these little data points of other builders, like, trying to replicate this architecture, this structure. There was actually maybe I think it was a very early Modern Craftsman episode where you guys had on Jeff Sweener, I think. And I remember him saying, this was maybe like 2018 or 2019. And I think that it was Mike or Jeff, sorry. I think I remember him saying, yeah, we actually collect all these invoices and we just hand them over to the client and they just like write checks out of their checkbook, right? It
No,
was
that
like
was Mike. That
from
was
ECS.
yeah. That
Okay.
was no, not Jeff.
Not Jeff. Okay, then
No.
I'm mistaken. But it was like the first someone spoke about it on an early Modern Craftsman. It was like this first data point that like, oh, okay, I see someone else is like also
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing. And the more I started looking, the more I started seeing examples of that taking place elsewhere. And that's sort of how I got connected with Mike Connolly, who's become a close colleague in this industry. He's a really great guy because on his podcast, Levelheads, he spoke about how in his marketplace the funds don't move through his business because they move through title insurance companies, where lenders up in the Chicago marketplace, and it's not the only marketplace that has evolved in this way. I think Minnesota is similar and maybe elsewhere. But lenders, for similar reasons as project owners, don't want to use a builder as the like disbursement agent, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the only industry where you're doing commercial lending where you don't have full line of sight and full visibility on where the funds go.
Right.
And you're essentially entrusting this builder to make sure funds are getting its way to the downstream recipients.
Yep.
But those trades and suppliers basically can place a lien on the property that the lender is using as collateral, right? So it's just very risky environment. And as a result, in Chicago, they use title insurance companies as the like disbursement agents, right? So let's say, oh, you got a draw request, it comes into us, we're sending it to Chicago Title. We're going to make sure all the paperwork's in order. And now the title insurance company cuts checks directly to the trades and suppliers, but they're not really purpose built for that solution. Like it's not driven by software. It's still a lot of like email spreadsheet based, but it was kind of this evidence that, hey, builders aren't the only ones who struggle with this problem. I mean, it's all facets of the industry. It's the project owners and the lenders as well.
Yeah.
Not to mention the trade partners and suppliers who are really, in my opinion, the ones who front like the heaviest burden of this because they're just trying to earn a decent wage for a good hard day's work. And because there isn't like a good structure to move money in this like fast, secure, efficient way where you create like every project turns into its own financial ecosystem. I mean, the industry is like notorious for extremely long pay cycle times. As a result, there's all these like working capital products that come about to stem that cash flow, insolvency need that only acts as a tax on that business and the whole ecosystem. And it's it just became apparent to me that something's got to change, and I care very deeply about where this industry is headed, not only in terms of like, are we going to be able to attract the next generation of youth to become craftsmen and craftswomen, but I look at like, the torch that I want to carry as being, let me try and see if there's a way in which we can develop a system or a process or a tool in which you can run a stronger business, right? So that more businesses can not only exist, but thrive. And this industry has just a crazy high failure rate for businesses. And what's interesting is that most of them, I think this is like a Forbes article I read sometime. And so, don't quote me on it, but like most businesses in construction don't fail during tough economic times. They fail during periods of growth because this becomes exponentially harder to manage.
Yeah.
And that's where they run into these cash flow problems until all of a sudden house of cards comes falling down,
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's the tool you built, LedgerWise.
Correct. So, yeah, LedgerWise is ultimately the culmination of this now past decade in construction, seeing the industry through this lens that I feel uniquely positioned in a way. And I say that as humbly as I can, given the fact that like I came in from, graduate school, but more so than anything, like began to build my own business on top of this architecture, really struggled with how analog it was. Also seeing all these other problems that exist in the building industry. And the vision was kind of like I stated earlier, if you can develop a modern, intuitive software that's built on top of this architecture, you can basically build an entirely new pay chain for the industry. And we live in a world nowadays where the embedded banking infrastructure to make this happen actually exists. This isn't necessarily something that I think we could have accomplished even 5 years ago. But what we have built and what we're continuing to build is a financial operating system for builders. And we are built on top of a regulated banking environment that does exactly kind of what we discussed today. For every project you take on, you can open a dedicated account specifically for that project that becomes immutably tied to the software and the budget that you build for it. And we create a structure that really provides protection for all parties, meaning when you launch that project, you enter into a project account participation agreement so that a builder still has the protections that you would get in a fund control or escrow-like scenario. Meaning, if those funds are going to live off your balance sheet, you still need to have protections that a project owner can't just deplete that account and say, you know what, I disagree with what's taking place on this job site or these expenses, like I'm going to kind of deplete that account. It becomes a jointly controlled account to provide protections to both parties. That funds can't disperse to the trades or suppliers until both parties have approved to a payment workflow approval. But conversely, a project owner can't leave a builder high and dry, which is an experience that happened to me. And if it weren't for this fund control structure that I run my business on, like I would have been completely hosed. Yeah. And essentially what it allows you to do is give you a very holistic view of your business and every single project, the health of every project, the health of your business. And it creates internal financial controls. So money that is obligated for other trade partners and suppliers can move directly to them with all sorts of legal financial guide rails. So that's
if
what
we
we're building.
we'll put a link in the show notes. Anyone can sign up to do a demo, or is it live now?
No, we are in the process of installing my business onto LedgerWise. So
Sure.
We've been moving real dollars for several months, really stress testing, alpha testing it. We're migrating our first project, first of our 6 over next week. And we are going into kind of like our beta phase with our founding builder group. We've got a tremendous team of founding builders
Cool.
that I won't kind of disclose names yet, but some really top tier builders across the country. And we're probably going to be gearing up for a commercial launch. We're going to put forth our launch cohort tentatively starting January of 2027. So right now it's we're not hosting demos quite yet, but if you go to ledgerwise.com, you can see our marketing site. We've got some educational guides that folks can download. You can sign up to join our interest list, and we'll be putting out content in the coming months ahead. Showing people what it looks like internal to my own business. Sweet. Here's what a business looks like that runs on this structure, and here's sort of the financial clarity that you gain, and ultimately, putting some of our founding builder members on display as well, and hopefully kicking this thing off early next year.
I think to wrap this up, the two really important points that I think that we've chatted about today is the higher education and really raising the bar for the building industry, and how higher education is potentially the path for that, but lowering the requirement for financial education at the same time by allowing builders to be builders and less of a financial, fiduciary or just someone that has to focus on moving money and tracking money and understanding a WIP report on a weekly basis, simplifying that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in really leaning into both of those things is going to do what you just said that you were really passionate about, is making people better builders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just understanding your actual profitability and understanding what your business is doing and not allowing your revenue to be egotistical. I think so many people just feel as though they need to grow their business because they're not making enough money, and it's just they don't know where the funds are going. Like for me, there's an opportunity to help people create a better lifestyle, and honestly raise the industry as a whole and create an even playing field, better the industry. So I'm excited to see where you take it. I don't know how many people I speak with on a yearly basis, just with truly understanding just the basics of their business and the lack of education out there, and just how difficult it is as you grow and as you take on more work to understand what those numbers look like at any given time. So I think giving people some insight and some transparency as to what their numbers look like and how much work they should be doing, I think really it can be life-changing for a lot of people.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, it's definitely not easy. It's a hard enough business just trying to manage the construction side of it. I mean, you guys know, like, it's still a struggle day in, day out.
Yeah.
But to be able to like relieve yourself of all the stress and struggle and anxiety that comes from having to also fulfill this other job of being a, money manager is huge for so many people. And I think you just said it, Tyler, like leveling the playing field is really what it's all about. I see that the playing field is not level. And as a result, I tend to think that more of that pressure is applied to the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really difficult environment to have to exist in. And there is a limit to growth. I mean, I'm seeing that now in my own business, that there is a diminishing return to how big you can grow, where your profit margins do begin to get compressed. And I think that the name of the game is understanding where that sweet spot is for your model, run that model responsively and aggressively, invest wisely, and that's sort of the key to building, a sustainable career in this industry.
Yeah, and that's market dependent. It's business structure dependent, and it all comes down to like what that percentage is, and from a lifestyle perspective, what works for you. And again, determining what that break even point is, where it's like, yeah, I can do another job, but it's actually going to cost me more money. Why would I ever do that? And I think when you can do that and you can separate yourself from it, and you can separate like self and ego and all of those things, and you can make business decision based on actual business metrics, you're going to be in a much better position.
100% agree.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very enlightening conversation. I appreciate it. I'm all for it. I love it. I love people being able to simplify their businesses, and I think that as people grow and as they do bigger jobs, that it becomes less and less transparent. So I think it's cool to be able to simplify things, to be able to just see, what's actually happening within your business, and not need necessarily an MBA to be able to figure that out.
Totally. I appreciate the time, guys. It's honestly, I mean this, like, you guys, Modern Craftsman's been a big part of my own professional development. So thank you guys for what you're doing as stewards of the industry. And thank you for taking the time to have the conversation.
Yeah, man. Awesome. We appreciate it. And thanks for the story. Thanks for your service. Thanks for everything. Appreciate it.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you. See you, Shane. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
I love geeking out on that stuff. And I don't know. I have the conversation with people all the time where I'm like, I don't know. I'm just at this point where it's like the more work I do doesn't necessarily mean that I'm making more money. And it's just like I've created a very transparent business model, and that's what I prefer. And there are ways to grow it to a certain extent, but then like it just complicates things and my overhead increases. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people to understand in business. And they're comparing themselves to people based on gross revenue. And it's like, sometimes if you saw what my actual gross revenue was and what my take home is, you might get sick, because it's like, damn, I'll do 10x that and not make that. And it's like, well, if I can figure that out, and if I can understand those numbers and very transparently see what's making them, there's not a need to complicate my life and my business more.
I think it's super cool. Like, I think it's, by simplifying, it's what everyone spends the most time on and has the least understanding of.
Dude, and like it just gets more and more complicated. Yeah. And like what you look at one day versus the next day, like be complete. Like the point of reference and the benchmark is just constantly evolving and constantly changing. To understand like where you actually stand is almost impossible.
Yeah. Guys, if you want to continue to lean into simplifying your business, we have two things that you can join. Number one, you should join our newsletter. You can click the link in our bio on Instagram or head over to moderncraftsman.co. But we have the Modern Craftsman system, which is made up of 5 systems that we've been developing for months now. And the only way to see exactly what that is and get a sneak peek of what we're developing and also get the early release is to be part of our newsletter. So make sure you do sign up for that. And then we also have a private community for you guys. We've launched that a couple months ago, and we have a ton of founding members in there. And that link will be in our Instagram bio as well. But that private community is exactly that. It's a community for builders, contractors looking to have real open, honest conversations about their business. And we're dropping, some of our standard operating procedures and everything that runs Tyler's business and my business, and just keeping a nice, open dialogue about our businesses and hopefully helping yours. So both of those links will be in our bio on Instagram, or you can head over to moderncraftsman.co. But we welcome you to do that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I spent a bunch of time today going through a bunch of the deliverables that were created for the course, and very impressive, very exciting. It's really neat to see it all come together in a very professional manner and distilled down to exactly what you need and nothing that you don't. And I think you all are going to be very excited with how this comes together. And I know it's been a wait, and we wanted to get it right, and we wanted to invest the money and the time in doing so. And I think it's going to be worth it. So keep your eyes peeled for that. It's super exciting to see it really come to life.
I'm going to just add this because personally, in the first few years of my business, I would just collect documents and examples and templates from builders, anyone that would share. And I probably ended up with maybe 20 or 30 of them, and I still have them sitting in a folder on my computer. But I was going through the list of what we created for these, and we're over 100, which is like insane to me. So if you guys are even just interested in having just the templates and the documents, like that alone is literally, I don't know, hundreds of hours of our time putting them together. So that alone is going to make the value worth it. And right now we're finalizing all of our filming to walk you through each of those.
I kept telling myself, I'm like, this is too much. They're getting too much. It's too good.
I know. And I kept trying to delete things. I'm like, no, they need this one.
Dude, it's a no-brainer. I feel like it's the cheat code.
You know what? And honestly, this is you and I having a conversation and everyone listening now, but it has made our business better. Yeah. Like, it's now my entire business has everything finally organized
in one spot.
Dude,
I was going through all of it. I was like, damn, this is nice. Like I can redo everything.
Julian would be like, hey, where's the SOP for this? I'm like, let me go look in Google Drive. Now I'm just like, here you go.
Yep.
It exists. So guys, if you want that, you gotta be part of our newsletter, and or be part of our community. But I suggest you join both.